Welcome back to the Dark Reading News Desk here at RSA. Terry Sweeney, contributing editor with Dark Reading, and joining me now is Poornima DeBolle, co-founder and chief product officer with Menlo Security. Poornima, thank you for joining us on the Dark Reading News Desk.
Thank you for having me, Terry. Happy to be here.
We are talking about how to make enterprise browsers more secure. First of all, get us started with some context around what an enterprise browser is and how it differs from, say, the conventional browsers that we may use.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And for us, enterprise browser is different from a consumer browser in the way that it's fitted for the enterprise use case, right? So if you think about, what you and I do on our computer at home, we're watching videos, we're shopping, we store our credit cards, all of these things. Now the question, and to support that, the browser has become bigger and bigger, right? It has a very broad software footprint. Now, when you think about what you do at work, in an enterprise use case, you probably don't do all of it. You read email, you access your SaaS application. Right. The question is, do you need all of those feature capabilities that is addressing 2 billion consumers for what you need to do at work? So for us, the difference is an enterprise browser is configured and managed to fit the purpose of the enterprise. That's the difference between a consumer browser and an enterprise browser.
Is an enterprise browser less likely to accept all cookies or perhaps use encryption, or are there other features that get enabled typically on enterprise browsers?
Yeah, so we usually like to refer people to something like a CIS Level 2 benchmark, right? Which already kind of describes for you what should be an enterprise browser in terms of how it's used in an enterprise. So it could be things like you said. So it means do you want to allow people to use incognito mode or not? Do you want a host of remote access services that is available in the browser? Do you want that turned on or turned off? If you look at Edge, for example, they had some vulnerability in a web-to-speech API, right? Is that a use case you need for the enterprise? By turning it off, you're reducing the attack surface of the browser and protecting the enterprise, right? So there's a host of features like that we refer people to the benchmark to kind of understand and make sure that you're configuring it for your use case.
Well, say more about that. Why are browsers vulnerable in general? And can you maybe give some examples of how they've been targeted in the past?
So I usually talk about 2 buckets of browser vulnerabilities, or how they've been targeted, which is a better question. So the first set is, like we said, the browser is a very large footprint for a software. It does many things. If you think of what Netscape Navigator did to what a browser does today, it's a whole system in itself, right? It can do audio, video, you do Zoom, do shopping, all of these things. So when you look at it from that perspective, that footprint can have 0 days, right? So it has its own vulnerabilities. Like I said, the web-to-speech API vulnerability, and last year I think there were a few hundred vulnerabilities, be it Chrome or Edge, on each one of those, and those can be exploited, right? Okay. So there are threat actors who will take those 0-day vulnerabilities and send you to a particular website, which then exploits that 0-day, and you get malware, or you get infected. Now the second one to me is more interesting. The second way a browser is targeted is by using the browser's own capabilities and kind of bypassing the network visibility and manifesting in the browser, right? So I'll give you an example. So if you've ever done business with Japan, they love to use password protected files. So when you do business with Japan, somebody will send you a password protected file, okay, and a follow-up with that will be they'll send you the password. It's just the way they do business there, and it's been something they've been doing it that way for decades. Now, knowing that, how the threat actor targeted some of the Japanese customers or Japanese enterprises was, I will send you a password protected file via browser. So on the network, you really cannot do anything about a password protected file. So you have to make a decision of, do I send it to the endpoint? When you send it to the endpoint, the password and the badness and everything there manifests, right? So we call it highly evasive adaptive threats, where there's a host of techniques like the one I just described, where they're targeting the browser by using its own capabilities to evade other,
Sure.
inspection and detection. So I put that in two buckets. So when you say how are browsers vulnerable, there's a browser footprint itself that can have 0 days, but then there are browser capabilities that I can hijack.
Yeah.
And those are the two main ways that I would bucketize how browsers are targeted. There are many more for another time.
That's helpful context. But with it's a great lead into our next question, which is what are some of the considerations that with regard to features and capabilities that customers should look for when they're selecting an enterprise browser?
Yeah, so I think when selecting an enterprise browser, the first thing that we recommend from a Menlo perspective is like the existing browsers you have a very large, good developers behind it, be it Chrome or Edge. So an enterprise browser strategy can be evolved around your existing browsers. You don't need what we call a replacement browser, because the minute you add a third browser to your mix, you now have to patch it and maintain it and all of those. So our strategy recommends that stay with your existing browser. And then in addition to that, we recommend three main things, right? The first one is, how do you manage your browser? So like I said, it's a broad footprint. We deliver capabilities, but the CIS benchmark is a good one. For example, the US Department of Defense publishes a STIG for a browser. So get your hands around your browser configuration, manage your browser beyond what most people are managing today is like, how often do I update it? So get your arms around it, manage it, configure it for your enterprise, starting with Chrome or Edge, which is kind of a fine browser to start with. The second one is, now you've managed your browser, your users are doing something in it. So protect the user. The way we recommend you protect the user from 0 day and all of those browser hijacking that I talked about is we say air gap your browser to what we call a secure cloud browser. So all of the active content stays away from your user, so the user is always protected. And then the third thing, what do you do in your browser is you access application and you access data. So how do you then protect the application and protect the data with things like watermarking and data redaction and other kind of advanced DLP capabilities? So when you're looking for a secure enterprise browser, we recommend look for all three of those. Now, our architecture recommends you start with your native browser and a cloud browser, but it's important to look at all of those three dimensions, whatever your use case and ultimate choice may be.
Thanks. You mentioned Chrome and Edge. Talk a little bit about what Microsoft and Google are doing in this space.
Yeah, so both Microsoft and Google have started to pay attention to the fact that browser has become such an important application, right? I think it's a Google statistic that says that most knowledge workers are spending something like 75% of their time in the browser when they go to work. That's humongous, right? Like if you think of, a decade ago, it was in your Outlook and in your Word, like various applications, but today, most of your time is spent in the browser. So if that's the case, then they recognize the value of securing the browser, and they are releasing feature capabilities that we'll take advantage of as they come along to make sure that from a cyber perspective, those continue to be surfaced to the cyber team and managed by the cyber team. So both those organizations are delivering new capabilities. I just came from Google Next, and they deliver something called the Chrome Enterprise Premium, which packages a lot of these features. So I think they're paying attention, but this talk track or this selling motion is new to both of those companies.
Sure.
So it's great for us to collaborate.
All right. Poornima, take us out with some discussion about Menlo's approach in this vein and what some of the differentiators are.
Yeah, so there are many, right? So just to get your team, get your audience started on it, I usually highlight two main differentiators for Menlo, right? The first one is what I've already talked about, which is we make every browser an enterprise browser, right? Which means that you don't need to go shopping for a new browser. what you have, we can give you the tools to turn that into that, managed enterprise browser concept, which is great because no user wants to now get used to a brand new browser. No IT administrator wants to maintain a third browser on the endpoint, right? So it has a huge differentiator, especially when you talk to large companies, right? Like maybe a few 100-person company, you're willing to take that leap. But if you're 250,000 or one of our customers is 3.5 million, you're reticent to go with like what we call a replacement browser.
Sure.
The second one is our architecture. We sincerely believe, and we've proven time again in the market and with our customers, that a secure cloud browser has to be an important pillar in your architecture. How do you, in some countries in Asia, like Japan, Singapore, they mandate it, right? They mandate it because it has been proven to be efficacious. So we recommend that you have to have a secure cloud browser in your architecture, and those are the two important differentiators for Menlo.
Great. Well, Poornima, thank you for the fresh perspective on enterprise browsers and how they can be made more secure for enterprise applications. I appreciate you being on the Dark Reading News Desk today.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I hope to talk to you again as we develop more features.
We'd love that.
Okay.
We've been talking with Poornima DeBolle of Menlo Security. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us for this segment. We'll see you next time.